Good evening, everyone. This is the Burnsville regular work session, and it is 5:30, and I'll call our work session to order. And let's go around and introduce ourselves. We have some folks in the audience, and I think they're here because we have an update for the County Road 42 corridor in Burnsville Center. So,
Michelle Collins, City Clerk.
Dan Gustafson, City Council.
Bill Coughlin, City Council.
Ryan Peterson, Public Works.
Jenny Faulkner, Community Development Director.
Bob Close Studio, part of the Damon Farber team.
Tom Whitlock with Damon Farber.
Vince Workman, City Council-elect.
Dana Hardy with the city.
Dan Keeley, City Council.
Kara Schultz, City Council.
Elizabeth Couts, Mayor.
Jen Desert, Engineering. Kelly Messer, Stonework Engineering. Amy Burrow with Experience Burnsville. Lori Lugo with Burnsville Chamber and Pepsi.
Carol Jacobson, Burnsville Natural Resources.
Regina Dean, Burnsville City Planning.
Okay, and thank you, Lori and Amy, for being here this evening, and we appreciate your participation, yes, because the others are all city staff. So, great. Jenny, you're
Thank
going to
you.
tee us up for the Burnsville Center County Road 42 Corridor Master Redevelopment Plan update?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is an ongoing effort that we've brought before you. I think we were last here in October, just checking in and making sure your questions and concerns are being addressed as we formulate the redevelopment plan for 42 Burnsville Center area. This is the last plan meeting to go through. We have a draft of the plan that was provided in your background. Tom and Bob will provide an overview, and they've got a little bit of new information in the slides. What we're looking for is any input that you may have, any direction, things to be addressed. The goal would be to bring this to council for adoption at your January 22nd meeting with any changes or revisions that come out of tonight's meeting or any additional information. Along with that, I do have another ask of this. As we've started to go down this road, we've looked at exploring the opportunities for TIF and capturing that. And we have since learned that the Burnsville Center area will not qualify for typical redevelopment, renovation, or renewal districts. So in order for us to have more leverage in public-private partnerships, we're going to need some special legislation like we did for the MRQ. You've already adopted your legislative policy at your November 20th meeting, I think it was, so we do have time to get that before you at your next meeting to add a new priority item before you meet with the legislators in January. So that will be my ask at the end after you hear from.
And we can make that decision tonight to add it to the legislative agenda,
Okay.
because then it can be done. And all we have to do, because we've already adopted it, is to just amend it and then bring it into the consent agenda for the amendment.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Mayor. And with
Yeah.
that, I'll turn it over to Tom and Bob to walk through. I guess if I can tee it up a little bit more, we're going to kind of answer the questions where we left off last time, pick up with more of the implementation and next steps, and not reiterate all the goals and overlying design principles. So we're just going to pick up from where we left off.
Okay, great, and welcome, Bob and Tom.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Mayor, council members. So, as Jenny said, we wanted to sort of pick up where we left off. There was a question on the table last time we met, around the idea of the impact of pedestrian and bicycle facilities in the community, specifically this redevelopment, and then asking for some additional data on if there was data available on Heart of the City. But then we just wanted to kind of get into a quick review of the overall plan, kind of at a very high level, and then get into kind of more of a sort of public finance conversation, phasing how this might get put together as we proceed. So feel free to stop me with any questions along the way. Back to the questions that I had mentioned before about pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So we looked at a few different things. One was just national and local studies, and we can provide links to these to you separately. But there's a number of studies out there about the impact of pedestrian and bicycle facilities on communities, both from a health and wellness perspective, but also from an economic development perspective. There was a recent study that the Minnesota DEED group put together on the impact of bicycle facilities on communities. So we'll share that with you. I also wanted to talk a little bit about stakeholder feedback. So one of the things that we heard from, well, it was UTC Aeronautics, but now it's Collins Aerospace. And a lot of the large employers, Fairview and Park Nicollet, they all thought pedestrian connectivity and specifically bicycle facilities were really important from a multimodal perspective. Fairview talked a lot about having employees as far out, kind of within the southern area of the river, south of the river, and that they had employees that biked and they wished that they had more connectivity to work. Collins Aerospace actually had a bike event where they had over 200 bikers. So it's important to them and their employees. And then also, if you just look around building community at other retail areas within our region, if you look at Southdale, at Ridgedale, some of the other large retail destinations, integrating pedestrian and bicycle facilities were core to their principles. So part of it is kind of keeping up with that and creating kind of a more holistic community. So I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Bob.
Oh, that's good.
And then I think as we get into the financials, we can talk maybe about how some of those things might be phased in and what development triggers there might be, whether it's the transit hub for the Orange Line extension or new housing development that might trigger the development of those kinds of facilities at the same time.
I do have questions about the pedestrian connection because the plan right now looks from the Burnsville Shopping Center north. And so, and yet we do know that the owners of the property on 5 and County Road 42, the Sterling Group, is ready to do something about that now that the CUB, the Super Value business transaction is complete. So I will need to loop back with them. But pedestrian connection from that center cross Irving over to the next shopping center where we have Aldrich, Aldi's and all of that, and then over to the Target site. What treatments do we have with regard to a pedestrian scape that would allow people to park once and make that walk? Because if it's inviting in the summertime, and if we create the kind of environment that have people move from one to the other, have you thought about that connection? Because everything is going north and south, but we don't have
We can,
west to east.
when we get to the plan, we can talk about that a little more. We have very strong east-west connections, essentially one block off of County Road 42, both to the north and south. They're not right along County Road 42, but we were just talking about that, and that also is very much a possibility to have something that's more attached to the county road. I think the issue is going to be crossing Burnhaven, for example, crossing Aldrich, how those crossings of the larger roads is handled. But we can talk about that when we have the image up a little bit.
Okay, yeah, because you're starting on, from where we left out on page 4, on chapter 4, right? Yeah, Jenny?
Madam Mayor, we're just following up with Councilmember Schultz's question from the last meeting about pedestrian and use of future pedestrian. If we build
Okay.
it, they will come. And then I think we're just going to jump into the overview.
Oh, to the whole
which Bob will
overview,
get into,
okay.
and then we'll get into the
Because that,
financials.
I thought you were moving towards what,
No, it's a
Okay.
good issue, and we'll address that.
okay,
Yeah,
you're
and
just
I
looking
think-
at from the previous meetings.
Right, and I think as we move forward, that's really one of the critical next steps that we discussed as one of the first step items in the first 5 years. We have the Dakota County study that's going to be looking at pedestrian connectivity along the entire County Road 42 coming up in the next year. So I think it's going to be important that the city's engaged in that and incorporates that kind of thing in that study so it becomes policy for the county since it is a county road.
Okay.
So just quick update on schedule. So obviously, we're coming to the tail end. We have a draft plan put together. It's important that, it's not finalized. So tonight, we really want to get your feedback, and if there's additional feedback after the meeting, we'd like to hear that. But the intent is, as Jenny mentioned, is to take this feedback, create the final plan, and have that ready for you on January 22nd. So then, Bob's going to quick go over an overview of the overall plan, and then we'll get into the finance.
This page is just obviously looking at the center as it is today, which is very auto-centric and really reflects an older model. And the image on the right, which we'll get into in a little more detail, is just the vision for what could come. And we thought the two roads were important to look at as well, because it's a national concern that people are having about balancing roads better to be able to provide for multimodal movement. So bicycle and pedestrian use, and exactly how that works from place to place varies, but there's a growing awareness of the importance of dealing with all of them to have more of a complete street. So the Center Village vision, really, I think one of the things that we were really focusing on throughout this is flexibility and adaptability. We know that several of the retail establishments north of County Road 42 are doing very well, and that the Burnsville Center is struggling, but that there's interest in renewing. So to the north of 42, the plan is really evolving into what becomes more of a street and block pattern that would 400-foot square blocks, so it's downtown Minneapolis is 300 feet by 300 feet. So it can accommodate a big footprint, it can accommodate a lot of variety of use. That's what's planning for the north side. And the south side is really focused around the renewal of the center itself, and then adaptive use around it with various kinds of uses from various levels of housing, ownership, rental, and different price points, to office uses and civic uses. So it's really thinking about, the vision is really about building community. And so incorporated into it are green spaces, parks, if you will, green streets that are really focused on being comfortable places to walk, safe places to walk. So those are the things that underpin the village. It's flexibility, adaptability over time, creating community. And this is just a simple diagram overlaying that shows that County Road 42 and the interstate, they are what they are. We heard loud and clear that there is concern to have County Road 42 remain a really high-functioning county road. So that means throughput, as it's called, is high, and people can get from point A to point B. The strategy has been that we set up a hierarchy of streets as you move away from 42. And this has been done very successfully elsewhere in the country, where you can be 400 feet off of County Road 42 and have a very comfortable shopping, strolling street, even in a northern climate. I always qualify that because I believe it's true. And then there are tertiary streets. You can see that more on the north side of 42, where this is really, we have parking on the streets. We're really aiming to have these be very comfortable, almost neighborhood-like in a way, with mix of uses on surrounding the streets. Brings us to transit and parking. We're using kind of a mixed strategy for parking. We want to get people out of their cars when they leave 42. We want to get them to a safe place to park quickly and easily, but we want to get them on foot. And we want to get them moving through the space on streets that are smaller, narrower. They still accommodate cars because they will need to, obviously. And as a matter of fact, the bus, the Orange Line, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But it's the notion that by getting people out of their cars and having parking strategically located, which the plan is recommending, and by using a variety of different types of parking, everything from parallel parking on the street, if we can remember how to do that, and underground parking and deck parking. And I just joke because my daughter said, I don't know how to parallel park. But at any rate, it's using a strategy that says there's several ways to approach parking that can make it very easy for people to get to where they need to be going. transit, you can see the 4 orange marks on the drawing that show potential sites for the BRT station. Kimberly Horn has been looking at that, and we've got a recommended one on here that sites it kind of in the northeast quadrant on the Burnsville center side. It allows easy access into the site. It allows easy access for picking people up and then getting back on 42 and exiting the site. This points to some of the important aspects of the plan that you'll see in a moment, but this north-south connection being critical so that if you are living on the north side of 42 and you want to get to the orange line, you can get there safely, efficiently. So that emerges as a key part of the plan with the orange line station being sited on the south side of 42. Pedestrian and bike network, it's kind of, these are lines everywhere because it's our belief that we need to share the streets and we need to work hard on getting the pedestrian network completed. How, Burnhaven Drive, for example, how does that work with the rest of it? We think that sidewalks, plain and simple, protected bike lanes in some cases, shared bike lanes on quieter streets, makes all the sense in the world in terms of, again, kind of a multi-pronged strategy that makes bicycling in this district a safe thing to do. The connections beyond, as Tom was pointing out, to get over to Collins on the one hand, Ridgedale, not Ridgedale, the Ridges, the hospital on the other. Those connections are really important to be able to bring people here, and people who work there can live here in the future and be able to bicycle to work. 5-minute ride. Who wouldn't do it if you had the facilities there to do it? So the pedestrian and bike network is kind of integral to all of the thinking of this, and we think that it's a really strong positive to be able to provide for people who will call this place home, but also people who are coming here from the neighborhoods around it, to be able to shop or go to a musical event, etc. With Kimberly Horn, we've looked at a number of ways of getting people over or under County Road 42. The two schemes, the small ones on the left, are both looking at underpasses, which really, in terms of the grades out there, makes a ton of sense. Going over, you'd have ramping forever to get up above 42 and back down. People tend not to use that when you have to go that far out of your way. But it led to the idea of ultimately a bridge that is for an underpass with pedestrian and bicycle passage, no cars, but the bridge above becoming kind of an icon of the reinvented Center Village district. That thing would be designed beautifully, and it would be recognized, and it would be symbolic of the new birth of this place. So that's sort of in our mid-range in terms of short-range, long-range development. It's something we feel is really important. It wouldn't have to happen tomorrow. It's not cheap, but it is a key component to things here. I mentioned parks and open space briefly. We think the introduction of those kinds of civic spaces here is absolutely essential. It's important in Heart of the City. We wouldn't want to replicate what's going on in Heart of the City, but we do want to provide the same kind of focal point. So the one on the north side that you can see on the right of this slide is more of that kind of a park, stormwater management, recreational uses, hopefully attracting people from the neighborhoods to the north and elsewhere to come here and become part of the community recreation. On the far south end, you can see what we call the South Commons, the north one we call the North Commons. That one is coming out from Penny's site, and it's descending down over that hillside with the incredible views to the south and west. There's a winter garden that's part of that composition. That is an enclosed space in the winter, and it's opened in the summer. And they sort of act together as being these really important places on the south side. And then the streets themselves. We think of them as linear greenways that are part of the green network, urban reforestation, the whole thing about carbon sequestration and the things that a tree canopy does in terms of cooling, the heat island impact. So parks and open space, again, critical. And these are just a couple of quick images, easy for me to say quick. It took somebody a while to do these images, but they do show, they're both views looking north from the south side, suggesting that there can be water features, there can be ample space for food trucks and those kinds of activities, pop-up activities to happen in and around the new center. So with that, Tom?
So what's the overall economic impact of this, and what might you see if you pursue this? What sort of sequence of events might you see over time here? So we wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of that, and that is sort of in parallel with the action steps that are outlined in the draft report. But then talk about kind of what's happened in other communities, both locally and nationally. And then open it up for questions. So I'm going to go really fast. So stop me if you need to. So this is just a few different ways to measure kind of what the overall economic impact is from what that area looks like today to what it could be at full build out. And this economic model just looks at the area south of County Road 42, because that's sort of where we see a lot of the sort of early steps happening. So the two graphics on the left are the existing land use. So existing today, very retail oriented with some civic uses, and then proposed. It shows all of the additional square footage, but it also really reflects a mix of uses being introduced into this site. Again, the middle graph shows kind of existing real estate value according to Dakota County in today's dollars, and what that real estate could be at full build out, and that is also in today's dollars. So obviously, if you're looking 20 years out, that value would be a lot different in 20 years. But it's basically, 8 to 9 times the value of the current real estate. And then the graphic on the right, again, shows what that area generates today in taxes and what it could generate in the future at full build-out. This little pixelated graphic is, and we'll get this to you in a little cleaner, but this was a summary of sort of the public infrastructure projects that Bob just talked about. So that's everything from extending Aldrich through the site over to Buck Hill. It's the pedestrian bridge on County Road 42. It's new bike lanes. It's streetscaping, new local streets, actually north of County Road 42. So I apologize for this, but it's basically a range of $25 to $30 million worth of public infrastructure improvements. So it's obviously something that you're not just going to go out tomorrow and start building this. So these kinds of projects are long-term visions. So we wanted to kind of give you an idea what those kind of first early action steps might be as a part of this, and Jenny talked about it already a little bit. But some of the things that we would see in the first 5 years, certainly creating an implementation team, a staff implementation team to really focus on this area and the opportunities that exist. There's certainly changing the zoning. You've already done that south of 42, but we're recommending, once the comprehensive plan is approved, to amend that zoning both north and south. We've heard from property owners, not only around the mall, but kind of the areas that we're showing here that are circled. All of those property owners said that would really benefit and begin to unlock the potential of those parcels for mixed use. Certainly beginning to create an redevelopment assistance toolbox of potential, everything from grants to public finance. Jenny talked about TIF, so that's a big one. TIF was used both at Ridgedale. City of Minnetonka pursued special legislation for that. Edina used it at Southdale, so that's an important economic tool to pursue right away. And then there's certainly studies that are ongoing coming up. We talked a little bit about the pedestrian study on County Road 42 that Dakota County is doing. The Orange Line extension study is not due to be complete for another year, so continuing to be engaged in those efforts. is going to be important. And then beginning to unlock the potential of some of those key properties along the edge that are circled in red. That's kind of all new private development that could happen in the short term. So if we go to midterm, then hopefully once we have that economic toolbox set, we can begin to engage some of the property owners. We've already heard from Macy's and J.C. Penney and Seritage. Go ahead.
Tom, Kara has a question.
So first was 0 to 5 years, midterm is 5 to,
10.
thank you.
Thank you. That there's interest in investing in this area, and it's beginning to sort of unlock what that potential is, and working with all 4 property owners at that site. But we think that we could begin to see investment on the site in that 5 to 10 year period. Certainly, the construction of the Orange Line Transit Hub is also another 5 to 10 year. The bridge that Bob talked about on County Road 42. And then all the property owners around that site began to think, or have told us that if they can gain some parking efficiency, they can begin to create some outlots and create opportunities for redevelopment on the site. So you're seeing that at Southdale and also at Ridgedale.
Okay, Dan?
When you talk about TIF, are you talking about just the mall area, or are you going all the way to 5 with that?
I think that would have to
We
be
can do it the same way we
studied.
did the Minnesota River Quadrant, and then we'll go project by project.
Yeah, I
So
just want
that-
to know, I just want to know how much it
Yeah.
encompasses, so that
Yeah.
other property owners
Yeah.
have the opportunity possibly.
Yes, so Jenny, because we said the County Road 42, but Jenny?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, so some properties outside of the Burnsville Center proper may already qualify for TIF on their own. So when we talk special legislation, we'll be meeting with our financial advisors and EDA legal counsel to decide what the best strategy is for this area here. So when we did our study, we also had them look at the Cub Foods on 42. That one, because of the age of the structure and the lack of maintenance over the years and reinvestment, that one does likely qualify as it is. So we do know that, but we have yet to figure that out once we get the experts in the room to help give us some guidance on what would work best for the city.
Thank you.
And we'll have a pretty good understanding, because we said it's a County Road 42 corridor, plus the shopping center and all of that. So we might as well have our consultants take a look at the whole thing, just like we did the heart of the city, and see which qualifies and which doesn't. But so that when we go to ask for legislation, we understand what we're looking for. Dan?
Just one question. You have what would encompass where Seritage's property is now in the Phase 2 or 5 to 10 year. I'm guessing that they're not interested in sitting with an empty, neither are we, for another 5 years. So was there interim use discussions, or could that piece start earlier than that second lifespan or second cycle of this by potentially demolishing and building some of what we envision on that property now?
Tom?
That's a very good question,
Yeah.
and I think that's one that we've been challenged with just because of the complexity of the relationships at the mall and kind of understanding. I think certainly Seritage has communicated to us that they are anxious to
Yep.
see something happen. They are looking for something transformational to happen. They fear that the longer they wait, the tendency would be just to re-tenant the box that they have, and not engage in something transformational. So I think that's part of having the implementation team to continue the conversations that we've started, and move them in that, I think it's kind of sort of massaging that conversation.
Yeah, CBL has the same concern if Seritage doesn't do anything right away, that then will just do what the vote is done with the site. I'm going to first go to Jenny to comment, and then back to Dan. Jenny?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Also in our discussion with Seritage, they did note that if we have tools to bring to the table,
Yeah.
we are moved up the list.
Yeah.
And right now, they don't qualify for TIF. We don't have any tools to offer them, except for abatement, which is probably not going to move the needle
Yep.
with them. So until we secure the special legislation, which is
Yeah.
going to take 1 to 3 years,
Yeah.
we don't have much to come to the table with right now.
Yeah.
to help them. Unless they want to demo the building, we've got
Yeah.
L funding, but
Yeah.
I think that's why in our discussions, we'd love it to happen sooner, if they qualified right off the bat for some TIF, but they don't.
Okay. Dan, you had a follow-up?
She answered my question.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Tom?
So then looking long-term, that's when you would see, so long-term is 10 to 20 years out. So these are certainly out in the distance, but sort of that's when we begin to see consolidation of the surface parking into more of the parking ramps. You see that at Roseville. That was the last phase they did. They added parking ramps. And that's certainly a much more condensed retail area, which would begin to unlock further kind of outlots for redevelopment and introduction of mixed uses. And then I think the north is somewhat of a sort of a mixed bag of kind of where they're at now. There's certainly some parcels that are doing just fine from a retail perspective. Target just remodeled. Costco is obviously doing well. But Burnsville Marketplace and the Cub food sites are opportunities to begin to redevelop. So as parcels become available for redevelopment, I think that's when we would look to find opportunities to implement the plan, the breaking down into smaller streets and blocks, and have those property owners become partners in this. So that would be sort of much further off in the distance. So lastly, we just wanted to kind of give you a perspective of other retail areas that we've talked about a lot, Ridgedale and Southdale, but also Belmar in Colorado, and talk about sort of the overall timeline for those. The first, Minnetonka and Ridgedale, they started with a plan, just like you are, in 2012. And they saw some early outlot, kind of outside the mall area development, mixed-use housing, and then they did TIF pooling to do interior renovations to the mall. They redirected CIP funds to look at redoing Ridgedale Drive, and that's 6 years since the plan. And then recently, the bottom left image is JCPenney outlot that was created, and they're deeding back 2 acres for a town green for the city to operate as a part of that plan. So those are, again, long-term. They're 6 years into their effort. Southdale, they started around 2010, so a little longer, 8 years. Again, they used special TIF financing that came out of the recession that had a very small window, that they invested $3 million in TIF and I think got $15 million worth of improvements. Everything from mall interior improvements, new entrances that you see on the top left. And then they began to add restaurants like you see in the right. And then as we got 5-6 years down the road, you began to see some of the outlot development, introduction of mixed-use housing in those areas. And then the last example is Belmar. This was a 14-year effort by the city of Lakewood and this was a complete redo of the entire mall. They demolished the entire mall and created this mixed-use district. So the first phase 1 project was 8 years after their plan was developed. So these are long-term plans that require a lot of effort over time. So I think with that, we would open it up for questions or comments.
So Tom and Bob, I have questions because Belmar used a tool that I don't know if we have here in Minnesota, and that's the public improvement fee. Can you speak a little bit more about that, because it was in your background, and I wanted to understand more because that was a tool, one of the tools that Belmar used. The PI.
Are you familiar?
I'm not
PIF.
sure I can answer that. Leland Consulting would have the answer to that, so I guess I'd like to.
Because if that's something, if I'm reading correctly how that works, if it's like TIF where you're taking an increment to help that, then it's a tool that we don't have in the state of Minnesota. The better we understand that tool from the state of Colorado, maybe it's something that we could also look into. But it's using, it's PIF, it's public improvement fees. It's in your background, in your report. Yeah, Jenny?
Madam Mayor, I'll send an email with that follow-up information.
Yeah, because I think that was very interesting, because it's
Yeah.
another tool in the economic toolbox, if we can get our state to adopt that model.
Yep.
Looks like a s-
Okay, Kara?
So my question is, in looking at what other communities have done, are we going to be taking 20 years to do something that when we finish it is out of date?
No. I think the idea behind a mixed-use district, I mean, these areas are in constant evolution. Obviously, retail is in constant evolution, so it's never ending, and I don't think you're finished. But the idea is behind a mixed-use district like this is that you're not dependent on one center to create that experience. So if you think of mixed-use districts, they're constantly evolving, and you might have areas that are being redeveloped while you have other new areas. So I don't think, where now we have one asset that has one use, and it's very challenging to get that to turn around. don't know if you
Yeah, I
have-
think I would add that we're really at a unique time, I think, in history right now, with rapid change affecting everything from retail to how we move around and moving towards electric vehicles. There are so many things that are in flux, and we know that things will continue to change, to your point. And that's one of the reasons we are trying to create a strong framework here that is adaptable and can really handle a wide range of disparate kinds of uses. The mixed use model, vertical mixed use, has been essentially not allowed in suburbs for years. Everything's been very much pulled apart. The desire now is to begin to re-aggregate things. I mean, you don't want heavy smelly industry next door to residential, but heavy smelly industry is sort of, mostly it's clean now. But I think the point really is in reaction to the way our cities were evolving, we pulled things apart. And the automobile allowed that to happen really well. And so now people are interested in trying to pull things back together. But I think it's also, just to go back to the notion of change, we don't know how change is going to impact everything from retail to mobility, but we can see it. We can sort of see the front wave of that coming through. And so I think that an adaptable framework that can begin to flex with that change is going to be the thing we really are trying to achieve here. So it's not so much, we call it a vision plan, it's really a framework, a vision framework that allows things to happen within it. And they could be quite varied, and they themselves will evolve over time, Many of our land uses in the warehouse district, those were huge warehouses, now they're offices and brew pubs and theaters. And so things will continue to evolve. So,
Okay, yes.
So you feel that the plan that you're giving us allows for the flexibility, because you hit upon my major concern, which is we are in a time of very rapid change that would be culture-wide in several aspects, to where I don't even think we can truthfully picture what it's going to be like in 10 years, because I think it's going to be different than even what we think, and it's coming quicker than we think. But you feel confident that this is allowing for flexibility in that?
I think it is, just in terms of its physical layout, but also in the plan, we specifically address, new technology. 12 years ago, this didn't exist. And now we use it, to order food or call up a car to pick us up. It's changed our lives. And you're right, other things will also have those kinds of impacts. But there are certain things that are true about just human beings, and all the reading that I've been doing has to do with the fact that people still like to see each other face to face. They don't totally retreat into that. And community is really one of the premier ways of doing that, creating places that are safe and healthy and so on, where people want to be, live, work, shop, those kinds of things. So this framework is attempting to, and it's borrowing from success stories that we've all been reading about. So it's not unique, but it's trying to be as good or better than things that have gone before in terms of anticipating things that are still coming towards us. And of course, no one has a crystal ball. So you have to do your best to create place.
Bill?
I want to affirm and encourage what the mayor said about this public improvement
Fee,
fee.
the PIF.
What they did in Colorado is the developer does it, and for a lot of the tenants, they put it in the covenant to run
It's like a
with the
special
lease.
district.
Right,
Yeah.
to run with the lease.
Yeah.
So that every tenant then passes the cost. So essentially,
It's
according
almost
to the
like a
literature-
TIF.
well, actually, they say it's in lieu of a public sales tax. They call it in here a private sales tax.
Yeah.
So that the developer then can pass the cost along. They
Yeah.
put it in the lease, they put it in the covenant, it runs with the property, and when people buy something in the cities that were just listed,
Yeah.
there actually is a sub thing on your bill that calls it the PIF.
Yeah.
Or however, whatever
Yeah.
the acronym is,
Yeah, it is a PIF.
tax.
Yeah.
And it's a private tax collected by,
Yeah.
ultimately paid the developers. So I
It's-
I like the concept, so I'm gonna encourage the
Yeah.
council to
Be-
look at that as, down the road, because that solves my concern, because I don't
Well,
want to see any of this financed by utility fee or by
yeah,
homeowners levy or something, but this actually
Well,
makes
it's-
sense, and it's a private event then, a
Yeah.
private matter.
investment fee.
Correct. Done all by the developer, period, and
And it's
obviously-
approved by the city, and I don't know if it's, when you looked at it, was it approved? Is it a tool that the authority is given to the city
State.
to levy that? The state
It goes to
has to
state,
do it.
And the city
City, can-
has the
yeah.
authority to allow it,
yes.
but then the developer,
Yeah,
it's under the developer's control.
It's actually like TIF, where you're grabbing a portion of that,
Just to read
and then
real
it
quick.
helps.
It says
too.
here how they work. As part of their contracts with
Yeah.
tenants who lease space at shopping centers, developers require stores, restaurants, and other businesses to
Yeah.
collect a fee on goods and services they sell. PIFs are spelled out in the covenants that developers record against the property. Usually they're applied to items covered by a government sales tax.
Yeah.
And it says, the legal experts say PIFs can remain indefinitely. And at
So-
the same time, developers determine the amount of the fee to be charged, although usually it's set so that retailers, shopping centers with a fee can remain competitive.
Yeah, because if that's the case, what I would like to see after everybody takes a look at it and see, then we need to also then put it on our legislative agenda so that we can ask the legislature to give us the authority to exercise that instrument. And I think it'll be something that would be good.
Sounds apropos, for sure.
Well, yeah, because when I read through it and went back and did some research, just like Bill did, but I wanted to bring it to the table. It's your report. It's something that's already been used. It's used in the state of Colorado. It's something that we could use, and that'll help us with some of the financing
And
that
it was
needs to
used
be
in
done.
every Colorado city redevelopment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
According to the literature.
yeah,
And it's not like we haven't attached, affordable housing sometimes has longevity attached to it.
Yeah.
So it's not like we haven't been doing something like that
yeah.
for affordable housing, but to do it for this kind of redevelopment would be very,
They,
very apropos.
every city in Colorado that did the redevelopment used that.
Yeah.
PIF.
So, yeah, Jenny.
Madam Mayor, this is a draft plan, so would
Yeah.
you like to see language in the funding strategies that we consider or look into what PIF is as
Yeah.
part of this
The
plan?
PIF, yes.
Okay.
I think it's really, when I read through the whole the draft plan, I found that very interesting, and that was the only tool that wasn't like the others that we're using. So I was just wondering, and I was at Deed today, and probably I'm going to ask them to look and see what other states use different kinds of tools other than grants and all of the same things that everybody. But the PIF really piqued my interest when reading through the report. I have another question because you're absolutely right with regard to the plan. The plan is a design on human society and what is the most appropriate way that human beings like to connect with one another. And it's not new to us. It's in Europe, and it's been, European cities have been designed in that fashion wherever you go. And so that's the case. My question now is to look at, because Jenny, the report also says that we are now, with all of the product that is coming online, our rental is higher in the housing stock than ownership. So in looking at the housing demand for this, and will we be looking at a balance of housing stock between rental and ownership?
Madam Mayor, the plan doesn't get into who owns it when we think of it from a land
Yeah.
use standpoint. If that's a priority of the council, that we have a certain number or balance, we certainly could add
Yeah.
that into the beginning parts where we talked about what the those 10 objectives or goals are.
Yeah.
We could add housing balance as a goal, if
Yeah,
that's the
because
desire.
just looking at all of the background information, when you look at the housing demand and you look at the, I think I look at what's happening in Minneapolis, and they've done a nice job with the North Loop on rental and ownership.
Yep.
You know, and I'd like for us to take a look and say, how do we look at that balance?
So, Madam Mayor,
Yes, Jenny?
the principles start on page 26, so we could add something in there about balanced housing
Yeah.
stock, something general if that's the desire.
Yeah,
Build,
yeah, 121.
it's market driven.
That's market driven.
Yeah, I understand, but I
We
think
we
if we're
artificially
looking
did that before,
long-term,
And that's why we got in this predicament we're in now.
No,
Because we had this
but we're
unofficial
not
moratorium
looking
forever.
at a policy to be put in place, but to be cognizant.
I understand being aware of it, but it's market driven, and the market will tell us what's gonna get built out there, and I think we should go with that. And like I said, we fought that for many, many years in the city, and our part of the city is not developed because of it, and it could have been developed a long time ago.
Well, there's a thing called the recession that stopped a lot of that.
Oh, no, you talk to our staff here, they'll tell you, we were approached by apartments, even during the
Well-
recession to build there, so.
But I just want to make sure that we are aware. Self-awareness about all of these things helps us to look at what are the pressures and challenges long-term. Jenny?
So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, under the guiding principles number 3, broaden land use.
Yeah.
The current language says provide housing options to meet the needs of a range of users, socio incomes, and cultural backgrounds.
Yep,
So we
Yeah.
could add language there that speaks to a balance if
Yeah.
you want to. I'm just going back to the ends and outcomes, that we just changed that to talk about a diverse mix of housing stock. That language we could put in here if that's the desire.
well, let's have a more in-depth discussion, because it's not something that's, but the thing is, in just looking at the report and then looking at all of that, and then also listening to some of the folks who are talking about how it impacts our school district, how it impacts our community. So when you're looking at housing demands, and do we have a balance in all of that, we're looking long-term into our community. Bill?
And I won't say any more about it, but I see Florida has now implemented allowing PIF. So,
So now
Apparently
Florida
it's-
is,
yeah, just a December 6th article
Yeah.
where PIF is,
so Colorado and Florida are introducing that particular tool. Okay. Kara?
I do not want to, understand that we want to have an overall plan. However, I don't want to micromanage each section of the plan to the point that developers look at this and just go, nah, you're way too high maintenance and pain in the ass, I don't want to do it. So, like, I'm all for letting the market decide on what is built. You know, what stores go in there, what type of housing goes in there. That's not our land. And I think we will stunt it if we step too harshly. And I want to be very cautious, maybe overly cautious, but cautious.
Anything else? Jenny, Bob, and Tom, on your report?
I'm just hearing consensus not to change the language and to keep it broad as it is.
Yeah,
I just wanna
you know,
make sure I
I
get.
will, yeah, you can do that. The thing is, you know, there are all of us sitting at the table who will look at that and say, where's the balance? Because I look at this report and we now have a lot more rental in the city of Burnsville than we have owner occupied. Also have, you know, we're just doing the Healy-Ramey and we have people saying, you know, what's the impact on our school district? So I just want to be cognizant about what I hear from the community and what the community is going to look like 20, 25 years from now.
Just my personal perspective on that, I think if you look at the creation of this plan and the amenity that it's trying to create for the community, that you'll see a range of housing. I think if you look at Southdale, you see condominiums, you see rentals, and that's market driven, and it's a range. And I think part of it is if the amenity is there, people will want to buy and live there from an ownership perspective.
I understand all of that. I just want us to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Because I see the data now. But if we just are not aware and it's not within our framework of understanding, then it is what it's going to be. Dana?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm just keeping an eye on time for the
Yeah.
sake, we still have a lot of stuff
Yeah,
ahead of
no,
us on the
and
agenda, and I
that's
would just
just it.
recommend we
No,
continue.
thank you. That's why I said, is there anything else? Okay, Jenny?
Madam Mayor, I do have the one last request and to get some direction on the special legislation. If there's consensus for that, I'll
Yeah,
prepare a background. We'll
I
put on
think I
consent at your
heard
next.
consensus to move forward with this special legislation.
Okay.
And I also would like to make sure that
PIF.
we look into the PIF
We'll put that in
for the
there, too.
state of Minnesota. So those two things will be added to our legislative agenda.
Okay.
Okay? Is there any objections? Seeing none, we're moving forward, so bring it back on consent. Thank you so much, Bob.
you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, and the next item is the one-year review of the short-term rental licensing program. Jenny?
Madam Mayor, I promise I'll make up some time here.
Yes, I know you will, because,
As you may recall, we adopted this ordinance last year. It was a
Yeah.
one-year trial ordinance on short-term rentals, basically vacation stays. We adopted an ordinance that required a permit and a notification process for neighbors. Had some best management practices that we put together in a nice brochure to help advise those that want to do that. This ordinance is going to expire at the end of this month. We are seeking direction from you if you want it to be a permanent ordinance, if you just want to let it lapse, and vacation rentals would be illegal if we don't have an ordinance in place, or maybe you want to have some modifications brought forward and just have it be allowed outright. We have not had anyone come in for a permit since we adopted the ordinance. We haven't really had any complaints either. We believe when we go out looking for these, there's anywhere from 15 to 20 rentals in Burnsville at any given time. But over the last year, we've been monitoring this. We really haven't had any problems. And I will say and I'll do transparency, we haven't been out looking for them and enforcing them either. We've just been on a complaint basis and
yeah.
providing
As I looked at
information.
all of this, allow the ordinance to continue as is what I'm thinking. Bill?
Yeah, I'd still suggest the council do another year.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be an evolution. And just make sure that we have it, because if we don't have it, then it's not allowed. But we have a good ordinance and then let it move as is, and we'll have another review in a year and see if there's any activity. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of activity for a city like Burnsville. Where it's, yeah,
Maybe when we have a redevelopment.
maybe, yeah, 20 years from now. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, okay.
thank you very much. We'll bring
Okay,
that back
so
on
there's
consent.
consensus here to leave it, to allow the ordinance to continue as is.
We'll have to bring the ordinance to you because
Yeah.
it's expired, but we'll bring it back to you on consent with another year, is what I
Yeah,
heard. Okay.
very good, thank you. All right, the next item then is the on-street bike lane study. Jen, hello,
Evening, Mayor and Council.
and Kelly.
Kelly Besser is here with us tonight from Stonebrook Engineering. And we're here to talk about a multimodal study that we've been working on. The park master plan calls for connectivity between trails, and so this could potentially be an answer to that at a less expensive price tag than putting off-street bike lanes. So we're looking for council feedback tonight on the overall study for on-street bike lanes, as well as some potential pilot project locations. We have in our 2019 CIP $30,000 used for multimodal improvements, and so it's potentially one of those locations could be what the money is used for. So I'll turn it over to Kelly, who'll go through the study that Stonebrook
Okay,
did.
thank you. Welcome, Kelly.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Mayor and Council. Did I stop it? There we go. So what I'm going to go over first is the difference between the two different types of bike lanes that we included when we looked at the Burnsville area and what we wanted to include in our study. So the first type of lane would be a dedicated bike lane. This facility would provide a dedicated space for a bike to be separate from the driving lane. It would be delineated by a solid white line, as you can see up in the top picture on the right there. It would be marked with a pavement marking of a bike symbol and an arrow to show the direction that the biker travels. And the vehicle lane is next to it, separate. It would be about the width of about a half of a driving lane dedicated to the biker. And then also signs can be used on the side of the road to designate it as a bike lane. A shared lane would be just a wide driving lane. So a shared lane, a bike and a vehicle would travel in together. It would be wide so that the vehicle would have room to pass on the side of the biker, but they would have to use extra caution. There would be signage indicating that bikers and vehicles would share the road. And then a pavement marking to indicate that you can see it's kind of a bike symbol with two little chevrons over it. It's called a sharrow, to indicate that the bikers and the vehicles would share the lane. And then the share the road signs would be there as well. So looking at those two different types of bike lanes and other bike facilities, in the area, there is a state statute that, bikes are allowed to be on the road regardless of striping or signing that's present. The Minnesota Local Road Research Board did a study on existing bike facilities and how those are, what kind of interactions vehicles have with bikes depending on the different type of facility. So shared lanes and dedicated lanes and then other types of facilities were looked at. And basically what the study showed is that even having a solid white line as a separator between a bike lane and a driving lane provides much more positive interactions between vehicles and bikers and provides that separation. So in other words, it makes it safer to have that dedicated space for a bike. Also, this report was completed in 2017, so it's recent, and the information gathered would apply to what we would be trying to incorporate in Burnsville. We took a look at those two different types of facilities, the dedicated bike lanes and the shared lanes. What we did, what Stonebrook did, is we gathered information that the city had available as far as existing facilities such as off-street trails. We looked at existing parking lanes, shoulder widths, and then we also did some field data collection, signs that are out there, striping, and we came up with this overall map of the city and kind of laid out where we thought some shared use lanes and some dedicated bike lanes would work on different routes within the city. One one of the biggest things we looked at was connections to existing off-road facilities and how we can connect those with the different types of bike lanes. Another thing we looked at was points of interest. As the previous group talked about, the Burnsville Mall area, retail in that area, restaurants, that's a point of interest. Trying to make connections to areas like that within the city. Also, Collins, former UTC, they've indicated that they do have an interest in multimodal around their facility. Their employees are interested in having those facilities to get to work. And also schools, transit, were other points of interest we looked at when we were trying to kind of figure out where good connection locations would be. Jen, did you want to?
I'll get to that.
Thank you.
So, as part of the study, we did get some feedback from the community. And so one of the things that we did was created this online survey, which is popping up here. It's a map in which, and all the dots on the map showed points where people in the community raised their concern or showed a point of interest, something that they were wanting us to look at. So we got a little over 50 responses to the online map. And in addition,
I saw some of those.
Yeah.
I was like, no, don't do that.
There were some positive ones too.
Yeah.
And we also had an in-person open house where Kelly and I were available. We had about 10 people come to the in-person open house. I received a few emails and some phone calls, so we did reach out and tried to get public opinion on if we were to implement some sort of on-street bike lane. And I think overall it was a pretty even mix of positive and negative responses. Some of the concerns that we heard had to do with safety. There were concerns from bicycle safety as well as vehicle safety and having to avoid bikes on the road. Some of the avid cyclists wanted to see more connectivity and were feeling safe on the road already and liked the idea of having a bike lane to do that. Yeah. There was an overall preference if we were to do some sort of on-street bike lane was to have the dedicated lane and not the shared lane. There was concern about having the shared lane. And as Kelly brought up, bicycles can be pretty much anywhere. So the shared lane is kind of allowing that with a little extra pavement marking, but the dedicated lane kind of provides that delineation. And then there was a concern about losing on-street parking that we heard as well.
Yeah.
So taking that public outreach feedback and knowing that the dedicated lane locations would be preferable for kind of starting off with as these pilot projects, we narrowed down to these 4 separate locations for potential pilot projects and incorporating the dedicated bike lanes as the multimodal projects. So our first location we identified was on West River Hills Drive, and you can kind of see the overall location between, it's a short stretch, about a quarter mile between Cliff Road and Highway 13. And this is just an aerial view, kind of more zoomed in section of it. The total cost we estimated for this is pretty minimal. It'd be about $10,000, and some of the benefits of doing this section would be this project is actually slated for pavement rehab in 2019. So in doing the pavement rehab, it's going to need to get restriped anyways. So it'd be a good opportunity to try doing some dedicated bike lanes, putting on the pavement markings, that solid white stripe, and that would be really minimal cost just on top of what would have been done anyways. There'd be some signage with that too. Part of the challenge of this location would be there are some spots where the width would narrow down enough that there just barely wouldn't be enough width for that dedicated lane. So
And
on
it'll
top
take
of the
some parking. If you're going to do that, would it take away from the parking?
on this stretch, no.
No?
There are other locations where it
There
would
are
be,
other-
and
okay.
I'll get into that in the other
Okay.
ones. But in this particular location, parking wouldn't be an issue, but the added cost for possibly doing some more work to get that extra width where it does narrow up would be on top of that $10,000, and then the engineering to look at, those locations where we would have to widen a little bit. So
On any of the feedback that you received, were there people who used that stretch
Yeah, actually, this location.
number
is-
one?
Yes, there's the neighborhood north of this area that
Yeah.
people did indicate that there was a couple people from that neighborhood who attended the open house and had noted that because of the facility, off-street facilities on 13 and then also on Cliff, this would be a nice connection to just connect those two different roads instead of having to go around on the triangle. So yeah, this did come out of that, and there was some
Okay.
feedback on it, so. Go on to the next location.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Kara?
So they're saying they can't presently ride their bike on that stretch?
No, they can.
They can,
They can.
but they don't have a dedicated area or width to ride within. It would be more in the driving lane. And if there's a shoulder there, it's just not striped as a bike lane. So they can be in the shoulder, but it's just not a dedicated bike lane.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood when you said that they were going around the corner.
Yeah,
Rather
to
than
get
going
to the,
on that.
Yeah, and that would be to get to the trail on 13. If they wanted to stay off street.
Got it, thank you.
And then our location 2 is Loch Levon Drive. This is a longer stretch. This is about 1.5 miles between County Road 42 and 46. The price tag on this one's a little higher because of having to restripe this whole stretch. Currently, there's parking allowed on both sides for most of the stretch, so we would have to eliminate one of those parking lanes in order to gain enough width to do a bike lane in each direction. So that would be the higher cost, a little bit longer stretch. One of the benefits of this section is it does connect off-street facilities at 42 and 46. There's the Crystal Lake Recreation Park area that this would make a nice connection to as well. It's kind of a nice connection to neighborhoods as well. We did get public feedback that there needs to be more around the Crystal Lake area as far as bike and ped facilities. So this was kind of a good way to get that incorporated.
What's the price tag on that one if the other
That
one
one
was
was
10?
$49,000.
49.
Yes.
And according to the background, Ryan, you have allocated 30,000 in the CIP for 2019.
Yeah, that's that annual project for multimodal improvements.
Okay.
This is just kind of a drawing of what a typical chunk of that Loch Levon Drive restriping would look like. So you can see the 2 bike lanes, one in each direction. There's still 2 driving lanes, but one of the parking lanes has been eliminated. So you can see the no parking sign would have to be added on where the side we eliminate parking. 3 and 4, they go together because they do connect Williams Drive and Judicial. They connect at near the west border of Burnsville, and the benefit of doing these sections is Williams Drive is actually set up really well to do on-street bike lanes. There's a shoulder with no parking allowed for this stretch, and the width would be sufficient to add the bike lane symbol with the arrow and then add some signs. So this one comes at a pretty low cost of about $8,000, I believe it was, yep. And then in conjunction with that, Judicial, going towards the south, would be similar to the Loch Levon situation where we would have to eliminate one of the parking lanes and only have one and then do the bike lanes in each direction. Judicial is also a beneficial route because it is going to be the future Lake Marion Greenway. Also, you can see it's very tough to see, but in the upper left corner of the aerial photo, this aerial is a little older, but this past summer, the Rose Bluff Trail was constructed. So these 2 routes also would make nice connections to that new trail. And we also got public feedback that Sunset Pond area is a really nice trail area for families to bike in. This would connect some neighborhoods to that area as well.
Yeah, Dan?
On those streets, how much parking is actually occurring? We looked at that at all?
We haven't looked at it. That would be probably part of a public outreach effort if this was chosen as a pilot
Drive those
project.
streets and I very seldom see a car parked out
Sure.
there, so I'm just kind of curious.
Right, and, we could decide, get public feedback on,
Yeah.
which side is maybe used more. We did, like, as Jen said, that was one of the negatives of the public outreach was people don't want to lose parking, but that was more from River Hills, the folks that attended from River Hills, so
Yeah, okay.
That would have to be looked in a little bit more.
The River Hills, though, is right next to the shopping mall and the church. I mean, it's, I don't see any cars parked on that street either.
Okay,
Probably illegal to park on the road
Yeah.
there.
Probably is, yeah.
yeah. Dan Kay?
On Lac Levant, if you could go back, I think the parking challenge that this would cause is the overflow from.
All the
park across
recreation around
street
there.
On the east side of
Yeah.
Lac Levant, the park over there, and then, of course, the ball fields.
Yeah.
During the summer, there is a massive amount of cars that are overflowing into utilizing that
Yeah.
street. So that one, to me, as much as I really like that stretch, I don't know how we're gonna pull it off and take away the parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Recol-
Ryan?
Sorry, my recollection is we did reach out to the Park Department, Rec Department, and they felt that it was acceptable to do so. In fact, if you go back to the very first slide, what that shows all four, there you go. The Rec Department would tell you that they're trying to create these like 9 or 20-mile loops around.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said 9 and 20. Longer loops around. And what this can do, if you to do the Lac Levant, am I stealing your thunder?
Nope, you're
Okay,
fine, Ryan.
all right, I don't.
Go for it.
What you can do is on the Lac Levant and then location 1 up there, like County Road 11 and McAndrews all have off-street facilities. And this really would meet the goals of the park master plan to create the connections. So, 46 has a trail, and then
Yeah.
Lac Levant would have on-street. And then you get up north of 42, and then you got, there's off-street on 11, and then you can go all the way up. And then, if you get to Cliff Road, you can go all the way around up to the trail that's going to the Minnesota River Trail.
Yeah.
So that was some of the strategy used to
Okay,
throw out those 2 particular
So
locations.
that Lac Levant will hook up to the 42 trail that the county put in out there?
It also would make
Yeah.
that connection. Yep,
Okay.
it would.
Which is
If
a
you didn't want to
very-
go all the way to the Minnesota River, it would hook up right to
Okay,
that connection
all
as
right.
well.
Start to put the whole system together.
Right, without having to, $49,000 is a lot, but if you tried to go off-street there, it's, what, $500,000?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, to do it in this.
Dan Kay?
Well, that was really, and I didn't want to take away from your future slide, but how do these pieces fit into the bigger puzzle of what Ryan was really alluding to is, this is just these little segments, but where's the existing trail? Do you have a map that shows where these actually make those connections? And
That's on the PDF that we showed that was kind of zoomed way out, so
Yeah.
probably hard to see.
And we could provide that so that you guys can get a better feel, and that was, we tried to incorporate, make these connections on those established loops, as Ryan talked about, that are already established within the city, so. Thanks for pointing
And
that
then
out.
Okay.
these
Ryan?
wouldn't be the shared lane so much, these could be off-street. Once again, I'm not trying to steal the thunder, but people were, we had more against the shared lanes and more for the ones where they could be separated in all of these cases. Except I think if you chose to do Lac Levant, the South Cross, we'd have to figure out, there's turn lanes there, so we'd might have a little shared lane section, but, I think
For a second.
just in the turn
Right.
lane, so.
Okay. Kelly, you want to finish your presentation?
Absolutely.
so just to follow up,
Yeah.
the blue dotted line is all of the shared, or not shared, but I think it's dedicated lanes.
Potential.
That's the entire map.
Potential.
And then what you showed us was 3 of those, of that entire blue dotted map, which was significantly longer.
Right.
Going all over the place. Those are the first 3 that are saying, these are the affordable ones that we could potentially do phase 1. Okay.
So Ryan, then all of these blue
All the blue dotted around
y-
the
you
entire
will
city, those
be
are
in
all-
your CIP if we move forward with this kind of thing? Because right now you only have about 30,000 in it.
Let's say you wanted to do location 1 and location 2 to try to bridge that gap. The first location 1, like Kelly said, would be in our street program.
Yeah.
So I would argue that there would have been striping there anyway. That would be just built into the
Yeah.
project. We'd have to figure out where to come up with the remaining funds to do this section to get to the 49K.
Okay, and then you'll look long-term to do all of the connections that you have the potential.
We would be looking for direction on that, whether you want us to, in my opinion, the smart thing to do would be to try a pilot project out, see what kind of feedback we get. Maybe everyone hates it and Burnsville's not ready for this. Maybe everyone loves it and try a shared lane. We don't know, but once you get these in action, we will
Okay.
have a lot more chance to
So
get a good
Ryan,
feel for it.
I really understand how some of this stuff has worked, especially on Portland, when we did the roundabout and we went to the dedicated turn lanes and only had 2 and went away from the 4-lane.
Yep.
People kind of hated it. Now they just love
Oh, they
it
just love it.
Because they keep moving.
because they
You don't
keep
stop.
moving.
You
And the
don't
other
need-
is
you don't
that
need
they
each other
have
anymore.
a safe dedicated lane to turn
Yeah.
left or right, and traffic continues to move. So, yeah, Kara,
What was the cost of Williams and judicial?
that was less.
So judicial's
8 was
approximately the
Yeah.
same as what Loch Levon
Yeah.
would be, and then Williams
about
is
59.
pretty minimal.
Okay,
We could start a BIF, Bike Improvement Fund,
yeah.
and tax all of those.
Yeah, Kara?
So
Biff and
if
Piff.
you're looking at, is this something we start doing or implementing or that type of thing? I would be willing to look at something like this, but only on a street and only when a street is being redone, so that the cost isn't on top of
The
or
cost
in
is
addition
leveraged.
to. It's done at the same time. And I think you were saying location 1, that is already in the plans, that's road is gonna be redone. And if we did it at the same time, we have to stripe it anyway. There's nothing else that needs to be done. So there actually wouldn't be an additional cost, is that correct?
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the 8,000 is if we just went and
Yeah.
striped it. Now,
I would be willing to look at
guess-
that.
yeah.
Make sure
And
I'm
that's how we
saying the
did
correct thing.
Portland, Kara.
Yeah.
That's how we did Portland.
Yeah.
The difference here is, as I mentioned, there's a couple tight spots where, just because of that median that's approaching 13, there's a couple spots where we wouldn't be able to carry that lane as far as we'd want to. So there would be the option to look at maybe doing some work to widen some of those areas, but that would be on top of just doing the restriping and signing with the pavement improvement project.
Okay, Kara?
That I'm not as excited about on a project. I mean, like when it's a pilot, right? You know, I mean, I want to give it a fair chance, but I also don't want to, especially, I mean, we are a little tight on budget. But I also want to give it a chance where, quite frankly, I mean, that we're just not allocating a lot of extra funds to. And I get that it would be tight. And I understand that.
Yeah, and that's.
But it's doable, correct?
Yeah.
Tight, but doable.
We probably wouldn't be able to continue the dedicated lane until the point where we got enough width to have it, because we do have to follow state aid rules for this route. It's an MSA route, so we have to have the minimum. We have to meet the minimum widths for driving lane and for bike lane. But once we hit that, the bike lane could start, and there could be
Well,
signage
bring-
indicating
Bring
that.
back all of that. That's new information that you'll have to bring
Yeah.
back to
Okay.
us.
Yeah,
Okay,
that I'm
Bill?
not aware of.
Just a suggestion for Kara and the rest, just figure out what that would cost to widen those couple spots, and if
Yeah.
it's not cost effective,
Yeah.
then they
Right.
look at a different option.
Well, but the
It may
thing
not
is.
be very much
Yeah.
if they're redoing the road.
That's an MSA street. There's some funds there. So why don't you guys do the work and then bring back the information? Ryan, you,
So when we bring the preliminary report for the street project to you,
Yeah.
this could be an item of discussion?
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking?
that's what I'm thinking. I mean, it's there. We have some things here that you have to take a look at, but it's an MSA street. So there's some extra funding. Dan?
You say you have $30,000 now to spend on something like this?
So annually, we have a $30,000
Yeah.
capital improvement project.
Yeah.
We've done bus stops, we've helped
Yeah.
MBTA on those. Last couple of years, we put up signs and put up
Yeah.
for pedestrian crossings. So we're this year focusing on.
So can you work on something that would allow you to work within that budget this year and then bring back for next year's budget to talk about the following year?
We sure can. I would argue the goal of this project was to attempt to find something
Yeah.
that we could hope to spend this year to give
Yeah.
it a try.
A
Well,
pilot
I get
project and
that.
lets us
And maybe
understand.
maybe it's just fixing that street and getting that one project done, I don't know, but it's, at least get something started.
You could do River Hills and Williams and still have money left out of the 30,000, because
Yeah, you
if
could
it's not
actually, with those
allocated.
two.
The big one is Loch Levon and Judicial, and neither one
So
of those can
what
fit
I'm
next year.
hearing is consensus to make this the pilot project for 2019. Vince?
I live in that area and there's a lot of on-street parking on River Hills. And I could see this ruffling a lot of feathers, so if there was a possibility to do some maybe more aggressive community outreach to see what the response would be.
That's between
that's
Cliff
not on that
and 13,
Not
that
just the pilot,
section?
but through the duration of River Hills, because if the pilot's successful, I assume then it would go through the remainder of River Hills Drive.
Yeah,
You would continue it, you just want to let people bike on River Hills then?
yeah, they can still bike on
bike
River
on
Hills to
those
the, to the
Right.
north.
So I don't know if you need a bike lane, you're talking about a busy, dangerous
Yeah.
spot between those two places. I didn't hear you say, well, then we're going to keep it going around River Hills Drive when there's plenty of space. I've even biked that myself, there's plenty of space over that way through the loop.
It does have blue dots.
On
so it is
the
blue.
map, though, it's showing a
Yeah.
dedicated
Yeah, it is.
lane.
Yeah, it's
Right.
blue dotting it all the way around.
I
Yeah,
didn't pick
that's-
up on that.
that's
so-
Trying to think
future,
beyond
the
the
blue
pilot.
dots, right, Ryan? When you're looking
It's
to the future.
potential. It's
Pardon me?
it's potential, not
That's
even
right,
future.
you have a
It's just-
potential.
It's an option to look at. So
Yeah.
it's not that we're saying that this is the plan
Sure.
going
Yeah.
forward. It could
Yeah.
be if it made sense.
Yeah, Kara?
And I get that it's a potential plan, but one of the reasons why you're bringing this as a potential plan is because it connects things up. So I give it a little more weight that even though it's potential, like, there's a reason for doing it and picking certain streets. You know, otherwise, like, you wouldn't have chose those and connected them up. One thing I'm not understanding, and perhaps you can help me with this, is when you're talking about a shared lane. Isn't every single one of our streets a shared lane? I don't understand the difference.
There is really no difference besides
Okay.
pavement marking and
Striping.
signs.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just the striping,
Okay,
Yeah.
I was hoping I wasn't
no.
misunderstanding.
Part of that too, is just, it's driver awareness. Part
Yeah.
of that too, if it's a busy area that connects other facilities for bikers, it's gonna make the drivers more aware too, you know, not just the
That
bikers. So
entrance to that mall is like a
Yeah,
freeway.
Bill?
That's what I was gonna say. I mean,
Yeah,
really,
it's-
That's what it is. I was out in Tucson, Arizona, which is a big biking community over Thanksgiving, and, you know, everybody bikes everywhere out there. And that's all it is. It's a
Yeah.
driver awareness thing, so you try not to kill the person. You try-
Yeah.
It's a lot more
Kara?
comforting as a biker, too.
And I have one question. So in picking these spots, and you also spoke about how it's safer. So are those areas where we have an accident rate for bikers in Burnsville? And what is that? And then what is the differential on roads that have an accident issue? And then they create their bike lane, and then how does that change that accident differential?
So we did take a quick peek at accident rates. There's not that many incidents of pedal bike accidents.
No.
So it's really, and we looked at data, usually you try to look at within 5 years.
Right.
We had to go back 12 years to find even 4, you know, accidents that are serious injury. And then there was just like 1 or 2 of them. So in looking at that, we would have to look at traffic levels, and when you look at the state aid rules, there are rules that you have to have off street when you're over a certain volume of traffic. And so we would stay within that, obviously. And then we would have to take a look at, you know, those numbers, you know, as few as they are of those occurrences, and look at different treatments at intersections that would help with that safety. Because that's where the crashes are occurring, are at intersections for the most part. So
So it's intersections rather than
Yeah.
down the street.
that's where the majority of them will happen, yeah, and have historically.
Thank you.
I'll go to Ryan and then to Dan Kay.
Maybe to add some other thoughts on it is, we're not necessarily trying to address a accident problem.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is get it so that the bicyclist mode of transportation is more available. So it's not like we've had 10 accidents here and this is hoping to make it safer. The goal is to try to create the connection up to Cliff Road where all the bikers want to go with all the off-street trails where there isn't one, and hopefully to do that in a safe way. So you get what I'm saying? We're not attempting
Got
to
it.
make it
Yeah.
fix a safety problem. The goal isn't to fix the safety problem. The goal is to try and avoid the off-street trails and using the assets we have. So if that helps at all.
Okay.
It
Dan
does.
Kay?
The striping from a biker on street prefer to be on a trail perspective. The striping makes it far more inviting and encourages more biking of people who would choose not to without the striping, even if it's a shared road and you're riding between the outer white line and the curb. It's intimidating. You don't feel safe. You're antsy and anxious the whole time you're on the road, and you just as soon get off on a sidewalk or a trail. Riding on complete streets, as they're called, where there's a much wider striped bike lane, it puts that barrier. Instead of a thin white stripe, you've got a much wider stripe between the cars and you, and a lane that's marked with bicycles, and it gets back to your point earlier. It's driver awareness, and to Bill's point. And so I think we'll see a far greater number of people get on their bike and use bike to get around when you create an environment that makes them feel more safe to do so. Right now, we just don't have that. We don't have very many places where getting on a bike and riding on the street, unless you're on the sidewalk, feels very safe when it's a shared road.
Okay. Dan G. and then to Kara.
I look at this more like we talk about with business, setting the table for business. Well, this is setting the table for families, and we're working very hard to attract families to this community we're supposed to be. We want to be walkable, you want to be able to bike, you want to have all these great amenities. And that's just part of the family thing that we can create here in Burnsville. Because I agree with you. I think when you have markings, you're going to see more people on bikes out there doing their thing. And
As well as people wanting to go to work on their bike.
I know a lot of people that ride their bikes to work, even in the winter. They do it.
Okay, Kara?
So listening to this turn of the conversation, what I'm hearing is the council is looking at spending tax dollar funds to encourage people to bike, to ride their bikes.
Bill?
And I don't know that I agree with that. Like, we're out of a safety concern right now. So we're not addressing a safety concern. We're promoting people riding their bike using taxpayer funds.
Okay.
Now you're edging me into area that I'm not interested in.
Okay, Bill?
From my standpoint, it's pure safety. I mean, right now, in my group of cases, I have a 71-year-old guy that got hit on a bike. He bikes every day by a car. Not directly relevant, but driving back from Farmington today, as I was being tailgated by about a 17-year-old kid in a brand-new Camaro about 2 feet behind me on, at 50 miles an hour. All I can see is if there's a bike lane, I don't see that 16-year-old tailgating the bicyclist about a foot behind, because it's inevitable that in Minnesota there are a lot of terrible drivers that text and don't pay attention, and that's all we need is, even though it's legal for them to ride in a bike lane, for the texter, the drunk driver, whatever, not paying attention to that. In my bag of cases, I have another one that the drunk driver hits the 50-year-old woman coming back at 5:30 at night in Pilot Knob Road, driving her motorcycle back to home. And that's on a road, and that's on a motorcycle. So to me, it is a safety issue, plain and simple.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is about complete streets. We have been looking at complete streets and a multimodal system of transportation. So, yes, it does encourage more people to be bikers and to use that mode of transportation. And yes, it's an amenity, but it has something to do with having complete streets so that we have a safety aspect to those folks who choose a different mode of transportation other than the automobile. Kara?
Understand what you're saying about that, but that's also specifically why I asked if we're having a problem. You know, if we are having a problem with safety, that it's something we would definitely need to address, because that absolutely is a role of local government, is, you know, making sure that we have a safe city. But I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing that data that we have that issue. If we developed that issue, I'm way more on board with that, you know, with addressing that. But there again, in hearing, you know, complete streets and that kind of stuff, you know, I'm hearing, yep, we want people to ride their bikes. And my question again is, do we, as a city, want people to behave in certain ways? I mean, like, is that our role? As long as they're behaving responsibly and not breaking the law and that kind of stuff, that should be where our interest in their behavior ends. If they want to ride their bike, that's great. If they want to drive their car, that's great. If they want to walk, that's great. Like, all of that is great. If they want to take an Uber, I don't care. You know, go for it. But when I start hearing that we want, I don't understand why. Why do we want that?
Okay, I'm going to go to Bill, then Dan G., and then Dan K.
I am more of the mind that if we're going to do it, it is a safety issue with me, then that we should have a bike lane. I'm ambivalent about whether we need to do it or not. I'm just saying if we do it, from my perspective, then we need a bike lane.
Agreed, rather than shared. Agreed.
I have no feeling one way or the other. It's a chicken and egg problem. You know, I don't even know how many bikers we have that bicycle around Burnsville.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a regular jogger and I didn't see that many bicyclists. But there may be a lot of them somewhere that I don't know. And I don't know what they would say if there's a problem or not a problem. I just know that as a personal injury lawyer that does car accidents, there are a lot of horrible drivers that, you know, another case where, you know, the guy just got convicted of killing my client in a motor vehicle in a car in broad daylight, so from a safety standpoint, bike lane if we're going to go that direction.
No, agreed on that.
Dan G.
For me, if you get to the safety side of it, I would prefer to mitigate the chances of accidents by doing something than try to take corrective action after somebody gets hurt, and then we go, oh, there is a problem. And it doesn't cost that much really to take care of this problem,
Okay, I'll go to Dan K. and then back to you, Kara. And then I'm going to just say, what's the direction to staff?
Well, I agree with Councilmember Coughlin's perspective. That's really at the heart of this. But I know that most households have bikes. People like to ride a bike. They'll ride around their own neighborhood. The reason they won't bike very much farther than that is there isn't a safe route to get on outside of their own neighborhood. What we're trying to do is provide something that maybe would come through in a survey that, yeah, if there was some safe places to ride, I'd get out of my neighborhood, but I don't let my kids go out of the neighborhood because there's no safe places to ride outside of, their little residential streets. So this whole trail system is really about allowing people to get out of their immediate neighborhood and ride safely around town to shopping places, to businesses, whatever. They just don't exist. So nobody not that many people are doing it, which I think is a reflection of why we don't have a lot of accidents, because it's too scary to get out and ride on a shared street unless there's a sidewalk, and then you're riding on a sidewalk. So I think the whole thing of creating a pedestrian-friendly community to get access to parks from where people live, to be able to ride kids to ride to the park, there has to be a mechanism for them to safely get there, and we don't have it today. And I think that's really what the demand is. People are just asking for, give me a safe place for my kids to ride a bike. Give me a safe route that I can ride my bike around the city so I can go to a coffee shop and go eat and go shopping and or whatever, or just ride for the exercise to get outside. So I don't know, it's just demand and existing, there is no safe routes in existence other than the paths, the trails that we have put. But to get from point A to the trail, you have to get in your car, drag your
Get to
bike
the
there,
trail, yeah.
because it's unsafe to ride your bike from your house to the put-in point at the trail, in many cases, unless you're living in, right next to one. So we're just trying to connect all these trails to get safe routes.
Kara?
So as far as child safety, there is no way, even if you put a bike lane in there, I would let my child,
Well, that's
Go
probably a
on that
bad
street.
example to use, but.
like, that is not happening. So kids are still gonna stay in their neighborhoods. That's how it is, you know, that's,
Okay.
you know, it's a safe little training area, and that's good, and, you know, as they become teens, they graduate and go further on that. But talking about how it's not that big of a cost, what's the cost for all these blue dots? Because while we're talking about these little spaces, and it's 8,000, it's, you know, 39,000, it's this, does, but that's not what you have as far as the whole thing. So in talking about this is not that much of a cost, what is the cost for the whole thing?
I think that's to come. Tonight, we're asked to give staff direction on this segment that's a pilot. And so what I'm hearing with the conversation, that there is consensus to move forward with this location as a pilot, and then there will be more information on your CIP to come before us at a future date. Bill?
Not to belabor, Mayor, out of the ordinary, I'd like you to ask Vince Workman what his thoughts are, because I feel at a disadvantage, and I'd like to just hear from him.
Okay. Vince, what do you think about striped bike safe
Well,
lanes?
I'm very familiar with this
Yeah,
point, and I can
your
see
business
why.
is right there.
Yeah, and this would be, in my head, considered a pain point for somebody that travels a lot on bicycle. My sister goes everywhere on bike because she doesn't have a driver's license, and I know she struggles with this area. Coupled with the sidewalk in this area is not in the best shape either. While we've all been discussing this, I started thinking about where are other pain points in the city where there's maybe some lead up to connectivity and then maybe it becomes a problem. Are some of those areas places that we could look at implementing more bicycle friendly areas where people are struggling with, rather than where we would maybe like to see more biking take place? I don't know if you guys have looked into that piece of the puzzle at all. If Ryan knows.
Yeah.
I think I could.
Yeah, Ryan.
So what we're, to get back to the very beginning, I would argue we're after what the Park Master Plan
Yeah.
approved, which was create connections where you don't have them now.
Yeah.
We can't afford to build off-street trails. This is a very small percentage of the cost if we were to take all the sidewalk out and build
Yeah.
and start taking right away and all that sort of thing. So that's the whole, that was the primary intent, is we worked through the rec department, and this is where we think the most people are gonna use this facility, and here's where we're really missing the connections. So that was how we kind of judge it. I think location 2 is kind of off the table, and you haven't asked me, but I think you would get the most users
On Lac Laban.
on location 2 if we
Yeah.
really wanted to give this thing
Yeah.
a shot, because you know, we have all the parks down there.
Yeah.
Obviously, I
No, I
probably have
agree
maybe
with
overstepping
you.
my bounds by
Location.
bringing it
Yeah,
up, but.
so I
that would
agree
be-
with you, but one of the things that one is a little bit higher of a price point. And the reason why I think I'm hearing everybody going with location 1 is because you're reconstructing the street and the price point is much lower, and that's a pilot project. But I agree with you. Location 2 is where you'll have a lot more use because of all of the people. I go down to that area a lot because if you're going to go play golf, I'm taking that road to go there, and to go to Crystal Lake. That's highly used, a lot of activity, a lot of recreational activity around there. That's a very active neighborhood
with all
on
the parks.
bicycles. So I agree with you, location 2, but I'm looking at listening to the council and where they're at, location one is going to be reconstructed as a pilot project. It seems like it's the most cost-effective.
Well, I'll
Dan
throw
King?
out for the greatest impact, I would support location two, use the 30 grand and pull 19,000 out of our one-time budget reserves because it's a very small, tiny fraction of what we have, and get the best location done first, because you're really wanting this
Yeah.
to be somewhat of a pilot test for usage, right? Well, to me, the section in location one is not where I'd put my money first. I mean, it's a problem area, but that's where the users are down
Yeah,
there.
the users are down in location two. That's where it is. Kara?
If you were to pick which one you want as your test, which one would you pick and then why?
I would tend to go with Loch Levon Drive
That's
as
where
well.
everybody goes. You go around there anytime in the summertime, there are bikers and walkers all around that area.
I think because of the neighborhoods too around the area.
Yeah.
And for public outreach, just hearing people's desire to have more around Crystal Lake.
Yep. A lot of recreational activity. Dan G.
I could certainly get on board with Loch Levon, because I agree, our lake's out there, the ball
Yeah.
fields are out there. It connects to a lot of neighborhoods. It hits the county trail on 42,
Oh,
which goes
yeah.
both directions for as far
Yeah.
as you can see.
And into Apple
it really
Valley.
connects a lot of
And
people.
it's
Yeah, into Apple
safe.
It'll connect it into the Lake Marion thing that
Yeah.
we're about to build as well then. And
Yeah, I'm going to go to Kara, and then we need to give staff some direction. So we've got three people saying that location two is the way to go. Kara, and then I'll go to Vince.
So going to location two, we would use the 30,000.
Yep.
We would need to dip into an additional 18,000 to do that. But you're all right, for a test case, it would certainly be a good test case, because we'll find out how the parking situation really does wind up, and how people
Yep.
like it or don't like it with having that amount of parking removed.
Yeah.
That'll certainly be a test case, all right.
Vince?
And that was the point I was gonna reach to is, how many emails are we gonna get if we remove on-street parking in that area?
Actually, when you think about on-street parking, everybody, and Daryl is sitting in the audience right now, and a lot of the activities that have on-street parking is on the weekends, when there are all of those games that are going on at Fisher.
But even up into the neighborhoods,
Yeah.
as you get north towards South Cross.
Yeah, and I
Just trying
think, well, you're going to, before this happens, you'll have the neighborhood meetings. And you'll have the neighborhood outreach and all of that. And we'll get some information from all of that. Bill?
I was gonna make a joke and say, if it doesn't work, it was Huey's idea. If it works, it was council's idea, and it was a good idea.
Yeah, actually,
You're gonna have fun on your way out, aren't you?
Actually, from the very beginning, location two was is the most appropriate because of where all of the concentration of activity and the people who recreate and go around there. So location two is the best. But as I kept listening, everybody was saying, okay, we're going to be doing the reconstruction on location one, so it's not going to be as much cost, But location two is, so what I'm hearing is that go with location two. Consensus to Ryan and staff.
Yes,
Bill?
I think it's a good idea,
Yeah.
so I support the idea.
Yeah, yes, Ryan?
And just, so then, for clarity, you don't want us to design into location one, the trail then?
Right, we're gonna miss that opportunity, but it's missed.
Your pilot is going to be location two.
I'm not complaining.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm just
Your
making
location is-
clarification, there'll be
yeah,
no
because
disappointment when we
we're-
don't do
yeah.
location one. Fair enough.
Your pilot is location two.
Can I
Yes.
just add to that, though, if you can do location one without widening the street and have just a little conflict there for a little bit, you might be able to pull them both off. You can-
Kelly is the.
Did you just
wait a
say
minute.
if he saves 10 grand on the bids for that project, that he can just do it
right, it's
anyway?
built in anyways.
Right, there you go. I'm
Okay.
with you 100%. If you could save the
Then
money.
you'll connect that into the other trail on 13, which we want to connect to.
Why don't you
Pressure's on,
just
Ryan.
bring it back after you do all of your work? You know, Ryan.
So what
But
we
you've
could-
got location two as your pilot.
So what we could do is run these independently. Location one will be part of the preliminary report, then we can provide
Yeah.
what it's gonna take, and then you
That's
can
right.
make the decision at
Yeah,
that time.
that's right.
And then location two is.
But the
we're gonna go
location two
forward.
is your pilot.
Okay.
Your pilot is location two, it being approved to move
Okay.
forward, and use the 30,000 plus the one-time
Yep.
out of the general fund. Yes,
you,
Dana,
Madam
who's
Mayor.
looking at all of the money and say,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. Madam Mayor, members of the council, for the balance, it could be one-time money, but if council would give us some flexibility to look at other alternatives.
Absolutely,
that would be appreciated.
absolutely.
I always look-
I would
always
say,
like to
yeah,
look at all
absolutely.
alternatives for
You can take a
everything.
look at all of your funding and see where we can make that.
My
work.
concern using the one-time funding is that would limit our flexibility to respond to any of the unknowns that we talked through at our.
Absolutely. Do what you need to do. You're the
Thank you.
professional. You've done that well. Okay?
Got it.
Ryan, you got it?
We got it.
Jen and Kelly? You have location two. That's your pilot.
And possibly one.
And we'll bring
Okay?
back- yep.
And possibly one depending on the bids.
Exactly.
Yeah. But we'll get all of that once we get the report back. Okay?
Well,
Vince.
sorry, and so will that include some type of neighborhood outreach in that process?
It's always,
or
there's always
after
a
the fact?
neighborhood outreach.
Okay.
Always.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now we will go on to the native plantings in yards that are not being maintained. Daryl?
Okay, so this item got brought up. Staff was asked to research the potential for using native plantings in an effort to reduce the landscaping maintenance on some properties where there's maybe some code enforcement issues. And, the native plantings, after they're established, are less maintenance, but they're not no maintenance. And so another idea was that maybe there's a volunteer group that once these got installed, that could maybe take over and do some of the maintenance on those. So that's the stuff that we looked into. We do have city ordinance currently that allows for native plantings in the yard. There is some requirements in an effort to try to keep them looking decent, because they do still take some maintenance. If they're left unkept, they can flop over in the street or bug your neighbor and things like that. So we do have some requirements on how they can be installed. I think native plantings are excellent. There's a lot of benefits. A big thing right now is pollinators. Everyone's talking about those. Provides habitat for birds and other animals as well. This particular picture is from Open Circle Church, which
That's
is here
over
in
on
Burnsville.
Highland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
I know
they,
it well.
excuse me, they converted 2 areas from turf grass into these prairie plantings. And, I don't know, this is what a good, nice one looks like. This
That's
is,
right.
there's a lot of grasses, wildflowers. They've done a great job installing and taking care of it. And then here I kind of hit once established, they are low maintenance. You can see they have deep root structures, which helps prevent erosion. That also has the impact on stormwater, much less runoff and things than your typical turf grass. But despite all those wonderful things, there are some challenges with the plantings as well. Here is a location that the city of Burnsville worked with Excel on a conversion after their pipeline project. And this obviously doesn't look quite as nice as the last picture. This is the first season after the planting was put in. The green that you're seeing there is a cover crop. That's starting to come in. There's also a lot of bare soil and other things there as it starts out. Because native plantings do take kind of a good setup to be successful, You can see the initial cost, and looking at a residential lot, it depends how much they're gonna convert, but typically, you're looking at about $2,000 because you do need to eliminate the turf grass that's there. You need to sufficiently kill it or remove it because you don't want it to be competing with the native plants. And then you need to seed properly. You can't, you give yourself a better chance than just maybe casting some seed. Turf grass is easy to establish. These necessarily aren't that easy. And so then you can see, because native plantings put all their energy into the root system to start out. If you look, turf grass roots are about 6 inches long, native plantings are 7 to 16 feet deep. And so when they germinate, they put all their resources into establishing that root structure, which is why they don't come up as quickly and as some plants. And that's why there's the cover crop. It's an annual that does come in quickly, prevents erosion, and keeps things, well, that first year the plants, you can go out just before winter and your grasses are maybe this high on the native plants after you put it in the spring. But then if it's well taken care of the second year and third year, you can really see it take off. And so that gets to that there is a higher level of maintenance needed in those first few years, because the native plants are not going to be able to compete with the outside non-native things that blow in through the wind and things like that. So they need to be spot spraying and mowings and those type of things. And so we also have some current programs that can help folks with this. We have here at the city our Water Resource Enhancement Grant. That's 12 $1,000 grants that we do annually for anything that could improve water quality, and native plantings certainly qualify for that. The things that get installed the most are shoreline restorations, rain gardens, and then these native plantings. And Dakota County Soil and Water Conservation District partners with the watersheds in the county. 2 of them that are in Burnsville is the Black Dog WMO and the Vermilion River Watershed. They offer classes where people can come and attend. It's called Landscaping for Clean Water. And their experts on staff there help people design the plantings, how to put them in. And that's a big help to folks because a lot of the obstacle is just, how am I going to do this? And so you get that, and then they also provide $500 in grant money. And so if you went through both these programs, and you can, the programs are set up to be able to work together, potentially there's $1,500 available, obviously on a limited basis, because there's only 12 in Burnsville, and the county has a limited number as well. But so there is some programs available to help people with the cost of getting it installed. Obviously, the maintenance, we don't necessarily have anything in that regard. But after talking with our code enforcement staff and asking them about the issue with the lawn maintenance, it seems like the vast majority of issues that they're dealing with are coming from vacant properties or bank-owned properties. And so these programs obviously wouldn't work in those scenarios. But also, I don't know if you're looking at a volunteer group, it's probably not going to be an appeal to them as well to potentially have a vacant home. If we do have an instance where we have properties where maybe it's an elderly homeowner, or for whatever reason, the owner-occupied area or occupied property, I guess, had someone who wanted to put something like this in, then I think those programs are there to be able to help. And so I think, doing this research, there wasn't any other cities that I was able to find that had a program set up for helping with native plantings or maintenance, different from the grant programs that we currently have. So, my thought is that with the few folks that may want the program, the programs we have are maybe sufficient to meet those needs. But, I kind of went through that quick, but if you have any questions.
Okay. Kara?
So it's looking like we only have a couple code enforcement issues on owner occupied. So for those, when we do code enforcement with them, are they told about these programs? Are they told that this is an option?
Currently, I don't think so.
Okay, I'll go to,
Maybe that's something that could happen?
I'm going to Ryan and Jenny. Ryan?
Well, I would respond to say that the people who are trying to get this done, those native plantings, typically are really into this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are, wanting it to
Interested.
look like the picture Daryl showed. It's not the people who aren't trying to mow their yard. That's not the target audience, nor is it, if you're not mowing your yard, you're probably also not gonna be taking the investment into. Would you, here I'm putting you on the spot, who would you say the folks are who attend the workshops and?
Yeah, currently, we do advertise the programs, through our newsletter and website and things like
Yeah.
that. And the people that show up and apply are people who are interested in
In native
doing those
planting.
projects, certainly.
Yeah, Jenny?
And Mayor, members of the council, we have some resources for homeowners on the webpage, so I don't think this particular one is on that sheet, but it's on a different area of the
Yeah.
website. So we probably can add that to
Yeah.
our homeowners resource page as well. I don't think it's there.
No, it's not
But
currently.
Jenny, when we do have homeowners who need help, we have volunteers, for instance, like Faith Covenant have people who have gone out and helped. We have Hearts and Hammers,
Correct.
those volunteers who go out and help with those homeowners who have property maintenance issues.
Correct. When
So-
excuse me, Madam Mayor, when people call, when they get a letter,
Yeah.
we have the number in there for our inspector. Give us a call. We hear them out. We do
Yeah.
try to direct them to resources for help.
That's right.
Usually it's the vacant homeowners or the bank owns that we don't hear from.
Yeah.
That have the longstanding or ongoing issues.
Okay, Kara?
So, if a homeowner has a situation like this and then they call in and they say, okay, yes, I know, but I'm having some issues maintaining my lawn, then wouldn't it be a good thing to tell them that these things are available? Because even though they might not be the person who is like, I'm into native landscaping, if they're told that these types of things are available, and also that although there is a ramp up of those 2 to 3 years where they will need community assistance, and there is community assistance, people willing to help them, and that this could then be something that would be far less of a maintenance issue for them, especially as they age, or as they have a continuing medical condition. Maybe we would get more people other than those who are like hardcore and searching it out, involved and interested. If it's something we already have.
As long as, I think it can be in your toolbox, since we have $1,000 grant money in the county. So making it available to them, I think is, at least they know, that's another option, other than all of the volunteers around this community, because they care, who will help. I know Prince of Peace also has a group of people who have always said, if you need something, let us come and help with some of those folks. Yes.
We can most certainly
Brian.
have Daryl's group work with code enforcement to
Yeah.
make sure they're educated on it. And
I would
every
love
time
that.
someone
Yeah.
calls in, we say,
Yeah.
look, we got this option. There's zero harm, and maybe we'll get the taker
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we're surprised we got, and we
Yeah.
get some more native plantings that are working out.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome, thank you.
So, okay, Dan Kay?
I can imagine this on a street where there's lawn after lawn after lawn, and then someone decides to put this in. When it matures, and it starts to seed, and the wind is blowing.
Yeah.
What kind of intrusion on the neighboring properties are we potentially looking at?
That is something, and that has been a challenge, because there was a time when we had a resident who wanted to put in native planting. So they did it anyway, and it caused a lot of conflict within the neighborhood. Daryl?
So the program that we have, we require people to have a small sign that they put up in their yard when they start, so that people kind of know what's going on. We do also require what we call kind of a buffer, so your planting can't
Yeah.
go right up to the property line.
Yeah.
There has to be at least I think it's 3 feet, so that, because these plants get tall, when they
Yeah.
bend over, you don't want your neighbor to not, have the issues. That helps. But if you have turf grass and you're mowing it regularly, then these plants will not be able to get established and cause an issue with your yard. It's, if you have an area that you're not maintaining regularly, then it is possible that the seed from this could
Yeah.
get in there, just like any weed, I suppose.
Yeah.
Could start growing in a plant bed or something.
Yeah.
But turf grass is pretty thick normally, and if it's mowed, then these plants don't have a chance to establish really.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the education process, and if that neighbor is going to put up native plants, that a sign's going to communicate to the neighbors across, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, and we've kind of learned over time.
Yeah, I
Things
know.
that work,
We've,
so.
this is not our first rodeo down this. Dan?
As you know, we have a very large native grass planting right out in front of City Hall
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
Have we gotten any indication that that has spread across the street to any of the lawns over there to cause problems?
No, because it's far away.
Well, it's only across the street.
Yeah.
Wind can
The wind
easily
will
blow
take
the
it for a
seeds that
ways.
far.
It
Yeah.
will take
But-
it for a ways,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
and it's not, and we're really close to the school district's property, and there hasn't
I'm
been
thinking more of
any,
the homes on the other side. There are plenty
Yeah.
of homes over there.
yeah. Vince?
Just a question for my own understanding, Daryl, are these generally homes for small animals with tails? I mean, does it create an ecosystem for mice and small rodents? Just, and I'm
Yeah.
not asking that to be a contrarian to
Yeah,
the.
it does, because that
project.
was
It
one of the
certainly could.
issues.
It's, yeah, I mean, it's.
Rodents.
It's, you are providing habitat for.
Yep.
You know, it'll
For
attract
small
them more
animals.
than your turf grass, you know.
Yep.
It's,
That was one of the issues that came up in the past when that happened, was there were a lot more rodents in the neighbors' garages than
Being
was
unintended
expected.
consequence.
Did I see another hand up here? Okay. Okay, what I'm hearing from the council, so, is that to let people know that this is available and that we do have folks who will help them with it.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Daryl, for your work. Thank you. Okay, we are at Roundtable, Transportation Alliance membership. I believe this is Darren Van Helden talking to all of us. I think he talked to me, he talked to Dan G., and did he talk to you, Dan K.?
No, I just pulled this
He
out
just
of thin
decided to
air.
throw it out. He thought he'd just put his name on it.
Darren actually talked to me back in 2016 about membership, and I asked a lot of questions, did a little research, and I, quite frankly, at the time wasn't overly excited, but I did connect him with Luther at MBTA, and Luther and MBTA joined, and Luther is actually sitting on the board. Subsequent conversations over the last 2 years, I've noticed more cities, more counties. Scott County just rejoined. Dakota is taking it up right now. And so I'm a little bit more, I guess,
Open.
I'm far more open-minded today about joining. And a lot of my issues in 2016, 2017 were, it was really, what are we going to get out of it? I mean, I was filtering it with, what does the city get out of being a member of this? So speaking with some of the other membership cities and county members, and then of course MBTA being a member, we're a pretty important city in MBTA's ecosystem. And so today I think I'm far more open to it. I think it's good to be a part of this. Transportation is going to take on probably a little different flavor of life over the next several years with the changes in the legislature and the governor. And so I think
How much
we
is the
should be
membership?
and that was the other thing. I think if the membership dues were significant, I might be a little less interested, but I think, I was told it was between $200 and $2,500 a year. And so if that's the case, I'm comfortable with becoming a member. I'm glad MVTA is.
Well,
I'm glad Dakota's taking it up as a county, and Scott just joined it. There were some political dynamics going on several years ago that caused a lot of cities and counties to pull out. They're all basically getting back in because the dynamics have changed, and, the mission's the same, though. It's
Yeah.
advocate for
For funding,
transportation.
both
and funding,
federal and
yeah.
state.
And that helps the city. I mean, we're advocating to get more money for our city to,
Yeah, because
in
I got,
Aurora.
because Margaret Donahue is the executive director, and Darren works for her.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so what do you all think? Benji?
I'm glad you brought it up. I like the idea of it. I've gone through all their legislative priorities and everything. I appreciate the fact that they actually support all forms of transportation,
Yeah,
including
it's a
light rail.
multimodal system, yep.
And then they also support all forms of financing from wheelage tax, option sales taxes, all that. I mean, they're having the conversation that has to be had to find the right funding to make the transportation happen. And I think we can benefit from that. The county, since pulling out of CTIB, is starting to do a lot more studies in this area,
No
which is
CTIB.
gonna.
CTIB is done.
I know, I said
Since
since pulling out,
pulling
yeah,
out of
CTIB,
CTIB,
their county's taking more of that. We have a good chance at some circulator lines out here. There's a lot of really good transportation things happening, and I think we need to be at the table with that one and a part of the alliance, and it gives us some good people to talk to about getting through all this in the future.
Okay,
So I'm
Bill?
supportive of it.
I'd like to hear Vince's
Okay.
thoughts.
Okay, from now on, I'll go to Vince.
Just go to
Since
Vince.
this is your last work session.
But Vince don't get
Okay,
the vote.
Vince?
Well, it's for the
Darren
future.
did not contact me about this, and I don't have a whole lot of prior understanding of this group, so I might have to do a little bit more research.
Okay, very good.
But I trust all of
Okay.
yours opinions.
Yeah. My only thing was looking at the cost. Kara?
I truthfully don't have strong feelings one way or
One.
another on this.
Okay, so direction to staff is that consensus to bring back information about the Transportation Alliance and the cost. So Ryan, you must have some information about them.
Well, just on the website, we receive about $3 million in state aid each year, and then the public dues are based on that. And so if you get between $1 million and $5 million, the fees are between $625 and $1,715.
Oh.
So it's in that 625, well, obviously what I
Yeah,
just said.
so it's even less then.
Well, these two
Okay.
guys will donate.
Yeah, and you know what? When I looked at this, when it was brought back to my attention, and then having some communications back and forth with Darren and Margaret, you know, it makes sense with regard to what we're trying to do with the mall, when we're looking at transit, and anything that's going to help elevate our goals and objectives for the city is going to be good for us. And it's not a big price tag to be at this table and to be part of the solution, not only for transportation, but transit.
We were apparently a member going back to 73.
Yeah, we did. We were a member.
Up until 2014, that's when a lot of
Yeah.
cities and counties bailed out for numerous
Yeah.
reasons. And
We
Nobody asked my
were.
opinion on that back then.
Yeah.
2014, were you here?
Okay, so, all right, so consensus is staff, if it's 600, I think there's consensus to move forward with being a member of the Transportation Alliance. Okay? All right. Reports. Bill? Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, earlier I heard you say bring back the information.
Yeah, but Ryan just gave it to us at $600.
Or between, just to be
16,
clarified,
17.
between 625 and 1,750.
Okay,
So $1,200 or something.
it seems like it's doable.
like
It was
$4
less than what Dan Kay said it was. So,
I don't think so.
then there's consensus to belong.
think they actually have
Okay, Bill, you have any reports? Dan, do you have any reports?
Dakota Broadband meets tomorrow, 35W meets Thursday. Ames Center will come to us next week or next month with their recommendations for their future.
Okay. Kara? No. Dan?
Nothing pressing.
Okay, yeah, and we all had the CBB's report at the council meeting last, so you have all of that. And we had our MLC meeting, and it was mostly about, we met in Woodbury, and so we had an overview of all of the development going on in Woodbury. But most of it was looking at the legislative agenda. Everybody's looking at the legislative agenda for next year, so we did that. And the other piece was saying goodbye to all of the elected officials who are retiring. So, Dana, was there anything that I missed with that? No.
When is the party for Councilmember Coughlin?
He has
It's gonna
not,
last 30 seconds.
he has not talked about that, so I don't know.
What are you, bah humbugging or your going away party?
Gateville.
Do you want us to just show up at your house?
Yeah, let's go to
I just
Skateville
had-
and put on skates and
I
see
just
how
had-
many
I just
times
had
we can
my
fall.
Okay.
He's about a attorney. He knows that.
Bill, you want to work with Michelle and Dana, or?
Isn't it fun to be
Oh,
put
no,
on the
okay,
spot
the
to
thing is-
orchestrate your own going away party?
No, well, the thing is, unless he wants one, you know, it's,
I think.
Bill, I
haven't left-
don't wanna hear any more no's out of you, okay?
I
Okay.
haven't left yet.
You want me to
Yeah,
chair the party
okay.
committee?
We could plan, come on, 8 years on the council, I think it'd be great to have one.
Okay, Bill,
We'll
if
just
you don't
show
want
that
to do
you're
it.
Unless you
we're,
refuse.
We know where
Bill-
you live.
Bill, if you don't want to, you're gonna get one. Okay, no,
That'll teach me to make
Yeah.
that comment.
you know.
knew you had that coming.
You know, I'm sorry, you're gonna get one, so, Dana,
got one.
Michelle, Jenny, and, so let's look at that. And then we'll look at his calendar and everybody's calendar, and we'll have it in January, okay?
Here.
Dana, anything else?
Nothing.
Jenny, Ryan? Michelle?
Michelle, please contact me for content for the roasting portion of the
Yeah.
going away party.
Okay.
Can I help
With-
write that?
Everybody,
We'll all
everybody
have
can
some.
do their own roast. With that, our meeting is adjourned by acclamation. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.